Captain Sarah Chen stared at the massive alien construct floating in the void ahead of her ship. The USS Defiance, humanity's first interstellar vessel, seemed like a child's toy compared to the gleaming silver structure that stretched for kilometers in every direction. After 18 months of faster-than-light travel, they had finally reached the coordinates provided by the mysterious signal that had changed everything on Earth. The signal had arrived 3 years ago, broadcasting in perfect mathematical sequences that could only mean one thing. Intelligent life existed beyond their solar system. The message contained star charts, technological blueprints, and an invitation to join something called the Galactic Cooperative. Humanity had worked tirelessly to build the ship that now approached the rendezvous point. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. "They're requesting permission to board." Sarah nodded, her stomach tight with anticipation. First contact with alien life was about to happen, and she was responsible for representing all of humanity. "Grant permission and escort them to Docking Bay 2. Full diplomatic protocols." The aliens who stepped off their shuttle were nothing like what science fiction had prepared her for. The Zanari were tall, slender beings with pale blue skin and large, expressive eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Their leader, Ambassador Kethril, moved with fluid grace as he approached Sarah and her diplomatic team. "Welcome, beings of Earth," Kethril spoke through a translation device that rendered his melodic language into crisp English. "We have waited long for your species to develop sufficient technology to join our cooperative. Your journey here proves your worthiness." The next several hours passed in a blur of cultural exchange and technological marvels. The Zanari showed them holographic displays of the Galactic Cooperative, a vast alliance of over 200 species spread across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Each species contributed their unique strengths to the collective good. The Hurani were master engineers, the Vox were talented diplomats, the Krell were skilled farmers who could make any world bloom with life. "And what role do you see for humanity?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious about their place in this cosmic community. Kethril's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, and Sarah caught something that might have been pity in his large eyes. "Humanity comes from what we classify as a class Thuris death world. Such planets are rare and produce beings of remarkable physical capabilities. You will serve as our military arm." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Military arm?" "Yes," Kethril continued, seemingly unaware of the growing tension in the room. "Your species evolved on a planet where everything tries to kill you. Your gravity is crushing, your weather is violent, your very air is corrosive to most life forms. You have survived extinction events, ice ages, plagues, and constant warfare. Such conditions create perfect soldiers." Commander Jackson, Sarah's military advisor, stepped forward. "With all due respect, Ambassador, humanity didn't develop space travel to become galactic mercenaries. We're explorers, scientists, builders." Kethril's laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but it carried an unmistakable note of condescension. "How charming. Yes, we understand your species believes itself capable of intellectual pursuits. But the reality is that biological imperatives cannot be overcome. You are predators from a death world. This is simply your nature." The tension in the room crystallized into something dangerous. Sarah felt her crew shifting behind her, their body language changing in ways that would have been invisible to the aliens, but spoke volumes to her trained eye. These beings had just insulted everything humanity aspired to be. "Perhaps we should discuss this further," Sarah said carefully. "May we see more of your technology? Learn about the cooperative structure?" What followed was a tour that opened Sarah's eyes to the true nature of galactic civilization. The Galactic Cooperative was built on a rigid caste system where each species was locked into predetermined roles based on their biological origins. The Zenari ruled as the intellectual elite, having been the first to achieve faster-than-light travel. The Hurani built what the Zenari designed. The Vox negotiated what the Zenari decided. The Krell farmed what the Zenari required, and scattered throughout the stations and ships were members of other Deathworld species, easily identified by their heavier builds and more aggressive postures. These beings served as police, security forces, and military units. They were fed, housed, and equipped. But Sarah noticed they wore subtle markers that identified them as military caste. They were property. "The Thorak were our first Deathworld acquisition," Kethril explained as they passed a group of bear-like aliens loading cargo under the supervision of slender, floating creatures that looked like jellyfish. "They come from a world of constant seismic activity and toxic storms. Magnificent warriors, but they've accepted their role and found contentment in service." "Accepted," Sarah repeated quietly. "Well, after the initial conflicts, yes. Some species require more aggressive integration than others. The Thorak learned that resistance was futile and costly. Now they serve proudly." Sarah exchanged glances with Jackson. The commander's jaw was set in a way she recognized. He was thinking the same thing she was. This wasn't an invitation to join galactic civilization. This was a recruitment pitch for slavery. The tour continued, but Sarah's mind was racing. Every system they showed her, every technological marvel, was designed around the assumption that some species existed to serve others. The cooperative's vast fleets were crewed by military caste species, while the intellectual caste gave orders from safe distances. Their factories were operated by labor caste species, while the administrative caste managed production quotas. "When do we begin humanity's integration?" Kethril asked as they returned to the Defiance. "We have training facilities prepared, and our military commanders are eager to evaluate your species' combat effectiveness." Sarah looked at the ambassador. This being who had just casually described the enslavement of her entire species as if discussing crop rotations. "We'll need time to discuss this with our government. This is a significant decision." "Of course," Kethril agreed, "but do not take too long. The cooperative has invested considerable resources in making contact with your species. We will require a return on that investment." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Sarah maintained her diplomatic smile as the aliens departed. But inside she was burning with a cold fury that would have impressed her Viking ancestors. Once the alien shuttle was safely away from the Defiance, Sarah called an immediate senior staff meeting. The ship's conference room filled quickly with her department heads, all of them wearing the same grim expression that had settled over the crew during the alien visit. "Well," Commander Jackson said without preamble, "that was enlightening." "They want to turn us into attack dogs," Chief Science Officer Dr. Martinez added, her usually calm voice tight with anger. "An entire species reduced to muscle for their empire." Navigation Officer Thompson leaned forward. "Captain, did you see how they looked at us? Like we were specimens in a zoo. Dangerous specimens they wanted to cage and control." Sarah nodded slowly. "The question is, what do we do about it?" "We could run," suggested Chief Engineer Kowalski. "Get back to Earth, warn everyone, prepare defenses." "With what?" Jackson countered. "They've got a 200-species empire with technology centuries ahead of ours. If we run, they'll eventually come looking for their investment." Dr. Martinez pulled up holographic displays from her scans of the alien technology. "Actually, I noticed some interesting things during the tour. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it's all designed by committee. Everything is standardized, streamlined, optimized for mass production. It's impressive, but it's not innovative." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I mean, they've created a system where the builders build what they're told, the farmers farm what they're told, and the soldiers fight how they're told. There's no cross-pollination of ideas, no creative chaos. It's stable, but it's also stagnant. Jackson's eyes lit up. You're saying their strength might also be their weakness. I'm saying that humans don't think like they do, Martinez continued. We're messy, unpredictable, adaptable. Our scientists fight wars, our soldiers build bridges, our farmers invent new weapons. We don't fit neatly into their caste system because we don't think in castes. Sarah felt something dangerous and wonderful blooming in her chest. You're talking about resistance. I'm talking about survival, Jackson corrected. They've made it clear that peaceful coexistence isn't an option. We either become their property or we become their enemy. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They were discussing starting a war with a galactic empire using nothing but a single ship and human stubbornness. All right, Sarah said finally. Let's assume we're committed to resistance. What's our first move? Dr. Martinez pulled up tactical displays. We learn everything we can about their technology while we're here. Every scan, every sensor reading, every observation. We need to understand how their systems work. And then? Thompson asked. Jackson smiled grimly. Then we show them what Deathworlders are really capable of when they're not following orders. Sarah looked around the room at her crew, these representatives of humanity who had just been told they were destined for slavery. Instead of despair, she saw determination. Instead of fear, she saw anger. Instead of submission, she saw the same stubborn refusal to yield that had carried humanity from the caves to the stars. All right, people. We came out here as explorers and diplomats. Looks like we're going home as something else entirely. She stood up, her command presence filling the room. Let's teach the galaxy what happens when you underestimate a Deathworlder species. The war for humanity's freedom was about to begin, and the Galactic Cooperative had no idea what they had just awakened. They thought they were recruiting soldiers. Instead, they had just made enemies of the most dangerous species they had ever encountered, humans who had something to fight for. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood in the command center of New Geneva Station, watching holographic displays that showed the impossible. 6 months had passed since the Defiance returned to Earth with news of the Galactic Cooperative's true intentions. 6 months of frantic preparation, technological advancement, and the mobilization of every resource humanity possessed. The aliens had returned exactly as predicted, bringing a fleet of sleek ships to collect their new military assets. What they found instead was a solar system bristling with defenses and a species that had already chosen war over slavery. Admiral, called Captain Kim from the tactical station, the Zenari fleet is broadcasting on all frequencies. They're demanding immediate surrender and compliance with galactic cooperative protocols. Rodriguez, who had been promoted from his position as the Defiance's communications officer to lead humanity's desperate defense, allowed himself a cold smile. Patch me through to all human vessels and installations. Let's answer them properly. The response came not in words, but in actions. Every human ship, station, and defensive platform powered up weapon systems that hadn't existed 6 months ago. Humanity had taken the technology samples from the Defiance's encounter and done something the Cooperative thought impossible. They had improved upon alien designs. Dr. Martinez, now Earth's chief science coordinator, had led teams of engineers, physicists, and military tacticians in a collaboration that defied the Cooperative's caste-based thinking. Instead of simply copying alien technology, humans had torn it apart, understood its principles, and rebuilt it better. The Zenari fleet commander, Admiral Viridian, appeared on the main screen, his pale blue features twisted in confusion and growing anger. Humans of Earth, you have violated cooperative protocols. Your resistance is illegal and will be punished. Surrender immediately and report for military processing. Rodriguez stepped forward, his uniform bearing the hastily created insignia of the United Earth Defense Force. Admiral Viridian, this is Admiral Rodriguez of the human species. We decline your generous offer of slavery. Consider this our resignation from your empire. You misunderstand your position. Viridian's translation device rendered his rising agitation perfectly. You are a military caste species. Resistance to assignment is impossible. We possess superior numbers, superior technology, and superior tactical knowledge. Superior technology? Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Let me show you what 6 months of human innovation looks like. The first human salvo caught the cooperative fleet completely off guard. Instead of the crude kinetic weapons or simple energy beams they expected from a newly contacted species, the human ships unleashed weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Plasma torpedoes that adjusted their trajectory mid-flight, beam weapons that somehow penetrated shields by rotating through dimensional frequencies, and most shocking of all, missiles that seemed to learn from their target's defensive patterns. The lead Zanari cruiser, a kilometer-long vessel that had subjugated dozens of species, simply disappeared in a flash of twisted space-time. The humans had weaponized their gravity manipulation technology, creating localized black holes that lasted just long enough to tear apart molecular bonds. Impossible, Viridian whispered, as his fleet's formation began to crumble under the unexpected assault. Your species only achieved faster-than-light travel 3 years ago. This level of advancement requires centuries of development. Rodriguez watched the tactical display as human ships moved through space with an aggressiveness that clearly shocked the aliens. Where cooperative vessels maintained careful formations and followed established tactical doctrine, human ships fought like the predators they were accused of being. They used asteroids as cover, employed gravity wells as weapons, and coordinated attacks with a creativity that seemed to ignore the rules of space combat. You're thinking like administrators, Rodriguez told the alien admiral. We're fighting like survivors. Captain Sarah Chen, now commanding the heavy cruiser Indomitable, had become humanity's most effective ship captain in the opening weeks of the war. Her vessel led a squadron of human destroyers in a flanking maneuver that demonstrated exactly why the cooperative had underestimated their new enemies. Target the Harani engineering ships first, Chen ordered her weapons officer. Without their repair vessels, the main fleet can't maintain their shields. It was a tactical insight that came from humanity's history of total warfare. Where the cooperative had specialized each species into narrow roles, humans understood that every element of an enemy force was both a tool and a vulnerability. The Harani engineering vessels, crewed by beings who had never conceived of being military targets, were destroyed before they could even attempt to flee. The psychological impact on the cooperative fleet was immediate and devastating. For over 1,000 years, support vessels had been considered non-combatants in cooperative conflicts. The idea of deliberately targeting engineers and technicians was so alien to their thinking that it paralyzed their decision-making. Meanwhile, human Marines led by Colonel James Reeves were conducting the first boarding actions in cooperative history. Their targets were Zanari command ships, vessels that had been designed with the assumption that the crew would never face direct combat. Reeves kicked down the blast door to the alien ship's bridge, his power armor absorbing energy blasts that should have been lethal. Behind him came 24 of Earth's finest warriors, each equipped with weapons that combined human ingenuity with alien technology. "Surrender," Reeves commanded in the Zanari language, which his team had learned during their preparation. The translator in his helmet ensured his words carried the proper threat. "Your ship is captured." The Zanari bridge crew stared at him in horror. These beings had spent centuries giving orders to military caste species, but they had never faced warriors who thought for themselves. The human Marines moved with coordinated precision, securing control points and neutralizing threats with an efficiency that spoke of countless simulations and preparation. Admiral Viridian watched his flagship systems shut down one by one as the human boarding party took control. "This is unprecedented," He gasped into his communication device. Military caste species do not operate independently. They require constant supervision and detailed orders. Maybe that's your first mistake, Colonel Reeves replied, having secured the bridge and taken the alien admiral prisoner. Humans don't take orders from species who think we're animals. Back at Earth, Dr. Martinez was coordinating the next phase of humanity's defense strategy. The opening battle had been a success, but she knew the cooperative would adapt and return with overwhelming force. Humanity needed to prove that their victory hadn't been a fluke. How long until the reinforcement fleet arrives? She asked her intelligence team. Captain Torres, formerly of the Defiance's security detail and now head of human intelligence operations, consulted his displays. Based on our captured data, Admiral Kethril is en route with a task force of over 300 ships. ETA, 72 hours. 300 ships, Martinez mused. They're not taking any chances this time. Ma'am, interrupted Lieutenant Chen, a young officer who had shown remarkable aptitude for alien psychology. I've been analyzing the captured communications. The cooperative is having trouble understanding what happened here. What do you mean? Chen pulled up translated documents on the main screen. They're describing our tactics as impossible military caste behavior. Their reports keep mentioning that we acted without direct supervision, modified technology independently, and engaged in what they call unsanctioned creative violence. Dr. Martinez felt a chill of understanding. They've never fought a war against equals. Every conflict in their history has been against species they've already broken into their caste system. The realization was staggering. The Galactic Cooperative had built their empire by conquering species one at a time, overwhelming them with superior numbers and technology, then forcing them into predetermined roles. They had never faced an entire species that refused to be categorized and controlled. They don't know how to fight us, Martinez whispered. They've forgotten how to fight anyone who fights back creatively. This insight led to humanity's most audacious plan yet. Instead of waiting for the reinforcement fleet to arrive at Earth, Admiral Rodriguez decided to take the war to the enemy. Using captured cooperative navigation data, human ships began striking at targets throughout local space. Captain Chen led the Indomitable and her squadron in a raid on the cooperative's local administrative center, a massive space station that coordinated the subjugation of dozens of species. The attack was timed to occur just as Admiral Kethril's reinforcement fleet was departing for Earth. The station's defenses were formidable by cooperative standards: energy shields, automated weapons platforms, and a garrison of thorac military caste warriors. But the defenses had been designed to repel external threats, not the kind of asymmetric warfare that humans specialized in. Ramming speed, Chen ordered as her ship accelerated directly toward the station's main docking bay. At the last possible moment, the Indomitable's experimental teleportation system activated, instantly transporting the ship inside the station's defensive perimeter. The technique was based on captured Zanari technology, but modified with human understanding of quantum mechanics and spatial manipulation. The result was chaos. A fully armed human cruiser materialized inside a space that had never been designed for combat, its weapons already firing at point-blank range. Critical systems throughout the station began failing as human marines teleported directly into key areas. "This is impossible!" screamed the station commander, a Zanari administrator who had overseen the processing of 12 military caste species. "Ships cannot simply appear inside defensive perimeters." "Human ships can," Chen replied over the communication channel as her crew systematically dismantled the station's command structure. "We're not bound by your rules of what's possible." The raid was a complete success, capturing vital intelligence and demonstrating to the galaxy that humanity could strike anywhere, anytime, in ways the cooperative couldn't predict or counter. More importantly, it freed nearly 10,000 military caste prisoners, including Thorak, Keth, and Vormak warriors who had spent generations believing that resistance was hopeless. Colonel Reeves stood before the assembled freed prisoners in the station's main cargo bay, his translator broadcasting his words in dozens of languages. The Galactic Cooperative told you that resistance was futile. They told you that military caste species exist only to serve. They lied. A massive Thorak warrior, his bear-like frame marked with the scars of countless battles, stepped forward. "Human warrior, we have served the Cooperative for 7 generations. Our young are raised in their academies, taught to obey without question. How can we fight against such power?" Reeves removed his helmet, showing his human face to the assembled aliens. "Because we're not fighting as military caste. We're fighting as free beings defending our right to exist as we choose. The Cooperative is strong, but they've made a critical mistake. They've forgotten that warriors fight best when they have something to fight for." The impact of this message spread through the freed prisoners like wildfire. These were beings from Deathworlds, species that had been chosen for their physical and mental toughness. They had been beaten down and controlled for generations, but they had not been broken. The sight of humans, another military caste species, refusing to submit and winning battles against impossible odds, awakened something that the Cooperative thought they had destroyed forever: hope. By the time Admiral Kethrill's reinforcement fleet reached Earth, they found a solar system that had become a fortress. But more troubling for the Cooperative was the reports flooding in from across their empire. Military caste species were beginning to remember what freedom looked like, and some of them were starting to fight back. The war for humanity's freedom had become something much larger and more dangerous. The beginning of a galactic revolution that would shake the foundations of the oldest empire in the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the massive battleship Unconquerable, humanity's first dreadnought-class vessel, as it led the largest fleet in human history toward the Galactic Cooperative's capital system. 2 years had passed since the first shots were fired, and the war that began as humanity's desperate fight for freedom had evolved into something that would reshape the entire galaxy. The holographic display showed the approaching battle. 40,000 human ships supported by allied vessels from 67 liberated species, all converging on Zenith Prime, the ancient homeworld of the Zenari and seat of cooperative power for over 2 millennia. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez from the sensor station, "we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. They've positioned defense stations around every major planet and moon." Chen nodded, unsurprised. Intelligence reports had warned them that the Zenari were making their final stand with everything they had left. The past 2 years had seen the systematic liberation of entire sectors as humanity's revolutionary tactics spread among the oppressed military caste species. "What's our enemy strength assessment?" Chen asked. "Over 100,000 vessels, ma'am," replied Commander Jackson, now serving as her chief tactical officer. "But most are outdated designs crewed by reluctant conscripts. The Zenari are learning the hard way that forced loyalty makes for poor soldiers." The transformation of the galactic conflict had been remarkable to witness. What started as humanity's singular rebellion had awakened a spirit of resistance throughout the cooperative. The Thorak had been the first to join openly, their warrior culture responding immediately to humanity's example. The Vormak followed, their massive ships switching sides in dramatic battles that left cooperative admirals speechless. Most shocking had been the defection of several Harani engineering fleets. These master shipbuilders had spent months secretly modifying cooperative vessels to fail at critical moments, turning the Empire's own technology against itself. The Vox diplomatic corps had fractured entirely, with many becoming intelligence assets for the growing alliance. "Admiral," interrupted the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface of Zenith Prime. It's High Administrator Cellos himself." The main screen flickered to life, showing the ancient Zanari leader who had ruled the cooperative for over 300 years. His once perfect blue skin was now mottled with stress marks, and his large eyes held the haunted look of a being watching his entire worldview collapse. "Humans of the Rebellion Fleet," Chelos began, his voice carrying centuries of authority that no longer seemed to matter. "You have brought chaos and destruction to a galaxy that had known peace for millennia. Surrender now, and we will find a place for your species within the proper order." Chen stepped forward, her uniform now bearing the insignia of the Free Galaxy Alliance, the governing body that had emerged from the ashes of the cooperative's caste system. "High Administrator Chelos, this is Fleet Admiral Chen of the Free Galaxy Alliance. We're here to offer you the same choice you've given to countless species. Surrender and accept a new role in a galaxy where all beings determine their own destiny, or continue to fight for a system that treats sentient life as property." "Impossible!" Chelos's composure finally cracked. "The natural order cannot be changed. Some species are meant to rule, others to serve. This has been proven by millennia of galactic stability." Dr. Elena Martinez, now serving as the Alliance's chief science coordinator, appeared beside Chen on the transmission. "Your stability was built on suppression and fear. In 2 years, we've seen more technological advancement and cultural exchange than your empire achieved in 2 centuries. Freedom breeds innovation, Administrator. Oppression breeds stagnation." It was true. The liberation of the military caste species had unleashed a renaissance of creativity that astounded everyone involved. Thorak warriors working alongside human engineers had developed shield technologies that seemed impossible. Vormak berserkers, collaborating with Keth strategists, had created new forms of space combat that left traditional tactics obsolete. Most remarkable had been the transformation of the liberated species themselves. Generations of conditioning that told them they were only fit for violence had been shattered as they discovered aptitudes and interests that the cooperative had never allowed them to explore. Thorak poets, Vormak scientists, Keth diplomats, the galaxy was being rebuilt by beings who had finally been allowed to become themselves. "The final assault begins in 30 minutes, Chen announced to her fleet. "All ships prepare for Operation Starbreak." The plan was ambitious, even by human standards. Instead of a conventional assault on the heavily fortified capital system, the Alliance would use humanity's mastery of spatial manipulation to bypass the outer defenses entirely. Every ship in the fleet would simultaneously teleport into the heart of the system, surrounding Zenith Prime before the defenders could react. The technique had been perfected over months of experimentation, combining human quantum mechanics expertise with Harani engineering precision and Vormak brute force power generation. It was the kind of cross-species collaboration that the cooperative's caste system had made impossible, and it represented everything the war had been fought to achieve. "All ships report ready," announced Captain Torres from the Fleet Coordination Station. "Execute Starbreak," Chen commanded. The universe seemed to hold its breath for a moment before 40,000 ships vanished from the edge of the Zenith system and reappeared in perfect formation around the ancient Zanari homeworld. The effect was not lost on the defending forces, who suddenly found themselves surrounded by an enemy that had seemingly materialized from nothing. But Chen's true masterstroke wasn't the tactical surprise. It was the composition of her fleet. Leading the charge toward the planet's surface were ships crewed by every species the cooperative had enslaved over the centuries. Thorak vessels flew alongside human destroyers. Vormak dreadnoughts protected Harani engineering ships. Keth fighters provided cover for Vox communication arrays. The sight of former military caste species working as equals, not as subordinates, had a devastating effect on cooperative morale. Many defending ships simply powered down their weapons and surrendered rather than fire on beings they recognized as kindred spirits who had found freedom. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple surrender signals from the outer defense platforms," reported the communications officer. "The crews are requesting permission to join the alliance." Chen smiled grimly. This was how empires truly fell, not to superior firepower, but to superior ideals. "Grant asylum to all who request it. Deploy Marine battalions to secure the surrendering facilities." The Marines who teleported aboard the Zanari installations were no longer purely human forces. Colonel James Reeves now commanded integrated units where human tactical expertise combined with alien strengths in ways that multiplied their effectiveness. Thorak heavy assault troops, Vormak demolitions experts, and human infiltration specialists worked together with a coordination that spoke of genuine brotherhood forged in shared struggle. The fighting on Zenith Prime itself was surprisingly brief. The planet's population, accustomed to ruling through others rather than defending themselves, offered little resistance once it became clear that their military forces had largely defected. The Zanari had spent so long relying on their enslaved warriors that they had forgotten how to fight their own battles. High Administrator Chellos was found in his administrative palace, surrounded by documents he had been desperately trying to destroy. The evidence detailed 2,000 years of systematic oppression, species relocations, and the deliberate suppression of technological advancement to maintain control. "You don't understand what you've done," Chello said as human and Thorak Marines escorted him from his throne room. "Without the natural order, the galaxy will descend into chaos. Species will war against each other without proper guidance." Reeves, his armor now bearing decorations from a dozen liberated worlds, looked down at the former galactic ruler. "Administrator, we've been at war for 2 years, and we've seen more cooperation between species than your empire ever achieved. Turns out beings fight better for freedom than they do under compulsion." The formal surrender ceremony took place on the steps of the Cooperative's High Council chambers, with representatives from over 200 species in attendance. Many were seeing their former oppressors for the first time not as untouchable rulers, but as just another species among many. Fleet Admiral Chen stood before the assembled crowd, no longer the explorer who had first made contact with the Zanari, but the leader who had helped birth a new galactic civilization. "Today marks the end of the Galactic Cooperative and the beginning of the Free Galaxy Alliance. No species shall rule over another. No being shall be enslaved to serve another's vision of order. Every world, every system, every being has the right to determine their own destiny." The cheers that erupted came in hundreds of languages and vocal ranges, a cacophony of freedom that echoed across the ancient plaza. But Chen wasn't finished. "The galaxy stands at a crossroads," she continued. "We can choose to repeat the mistakes of the past, where might makes right and the strong dominate the weak. Or we can choose something harder but better, cooperation based on mutual respect, progress through shared innovation, and strength through unity freely chosen rather than forced." Dr. Martinez stepped forward to address the technical aspects of the transition. "The Alliance has established the Galactic Innovation Consortium, where species will collaborate on research and development as equals. The Thorak military academies will teach strategy and tactics to any species that wishes to learn. The Hurani engineering universities will share their knowledge with all. The human exploration fleets will map new regions for colonization by any species seeking new homes. It was a vision that would have been impossible under the Cooperative's rigid structure. Cross-species collaboration, open sharing of technology, and voluntary cooperation replacing forced compliance. The early results were already promising. New medicines developed by combining human biochemistry with Keth botanical knowledge, starship designs that incorporated Vormak strength with human adaptability, agricultural techniques that blended Hurani precision with Thorak endurance. As the ceremony concluded, Chen found herself standing with her original crew from the Defiance. Captain Rodriguez, now serving as Alliance Defense Coordinator, shook his head in amazement. "Did you ever imagine it would go this far when we first met the Zanari?" he asked. Chen looked up at the sky, where ships from dozens of species flew in formation as equals rather than masters and servants. "I knew we wouldn't accept slavery. I never imagined we'd end up freeing an entire galaxy." Commander Jackson, reviewing preliminary reports on his tablet, looked up with a grin. "The best part is we're just getting started. The Harani have identified 17 unexplored spiral arms. The Vormak have volunteered to lead deep space exploration missions. And the humans have proposed a joint colonization program that would establish mixed species settlements throughout the galaxy." Dr. Martinez added, "And we're already receiving signals from neighboring galaxies. Word of the revolution is spreading. There are empires out there built on similar oppression, and their enslaved species are starting to ask questions." The implications were staggering. Humanity's refusal to accept their assigned role as galactic attack dogs had sparked something much larger than anyone had anticipated. The very concept of species-based castes was being challenged across multiple galaxies, and the Free Galaxy Alliance was becoming a beacon of hope for oppressed beings everywhere. Chen smiled as she watched a group of young beings from different species playing together in the plaza, their laughter mixing in the afternoon air. They were the first generation that would grow up in a galaxy where their potential wasn't limited by their species of origin. "You know what the real irony is?" Chen said to her companions. "The Zanari were right about one thing. We are predators from a death world. They just never understood what we'd choose to hunt." "What's that?" Rodriguez asked. Chen's expression hardened as she thought about the challenges that still lay ahead. Injustice, oppression, the idea that anyone has the right to own another sentient being. We're going to hunt those concepts to extinction across every galaxy we can reach. The war for humanity's freedom was over. The war for universal liberty had just begun. And the Deathworlders of Earth were leading an alliance that would ensure no species would ever again have to choose between slavery and destruction. The galaxy belonged to the free, and it would stay that way.